a little bit like talk about, whether it's going to make it, in the Envy Committee and on plenary. Okay?
We can hypothesize on
Yes,
that.
yes,
No
yes.
problem. Should I sit somewhere over here?
Here, that's fine, and we'll have Herbert just next to you. Can I? Okay. Hi. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to this joining on stage, and welcome to this joining us online. My name is Louise Guillot. I'm a sustainability reporter at Politico, and I will be moderating the next session, which will focus on the controversial, as my colleague said before, the controversial nature restoration law. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk indeed about this central piece of legislation under the European Green Deal, and also a little bit about the latest development and essentially the deal that was struck between the three institutions last week. So the new rules aim at restoring at least 20% of the EU's land and sea by the end of the decade, but there's been a strong pushback against those targets. So following a very long 9-hour negotiation last week, the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission finally found a deal. And so in this session, we'll try and look a little bit more into the details of that with our speakers and talk a little bit also about the future and the prospect of this legislation actually, making into the final step and becoming law. So, but before we start, I'd like to remind you that you can ask questions using the swap card art. Really don't hesitate to get them to us as early in the session as possible so that we can incorporate them in the flow of the discussion. And also I invite you to post on our social media using the hashtag Politico Sustainable Week. So joining me on stage, we have MEP Michal Viezik. You're from Slovakia and a member of the Renew Europe group. And it's just a few minutes late, but MEP Herbert Dorfmann from the European People's Party is also expected. He's just running a little late. So he's gonna join us in a second. But we can already start discussing the two of us. And I know, Michal, that you've been a very strong advocate also in your own country on protection. I see Mr. Dorfmann is here, so we can welcome him to the stage. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
No worries. Thank you very much for joining. We were just about to start, so that's perfect. So yeah, as I was explaining, we want to talk about this piece of legislation, and I wanted to start with you, Michal, to talk a little bit about what's in there, and I'd be quite keen to hear from you. What do you think a little bit about the agreement that was reached last week, which is obviously which moves the legislation forward closer to being adopted, but also includes a number of, some would say, loopholes or weaknesses in how these rules will be implemented in the future. So yeah, any first assessment of the deal?
Okay. Thank you very much for introducing us, and I'm very happy to be on this event. Well, if I have to speak in general terms, the birth of this file was very difficult and complicated. Mm-hmm. What started really as a very, very nice file had to go through a very complicated and difficult process where on some stage it was not clear whether there will be a baby at the end. Almost was not a success story, but right now we are really only one step ahead or from the final outcome, and I hope that the ride will be smooth from now on. I'm hoping that because the file is very crucial and very needed. If we really see the situation with the biodiversity and with the stage of ecosystems in European Union, it's very a grim story. Mm-hmm. Only less than 20% of the habitats that we tend to protect are in a good state. Yes. That goes also for the species. And that is not only an issue for the nature conservation, but for the functioning of our society, for our agriculture, for our fishery, for our forestry, for all those crucial aspects of our economy. They all are super dependent on ecosystems, on the services they provide us with, and we cannot replace them in any way, in any artificial way. So we are really deemed to cooperate with ecosystems and to find a way of sustainable, really, symbiosis with our natural world. And that is not happening. That is the part of the biodiversity crisis that is looming around the world, together with the climate crisis. Both crises are interlinked, and the main culprit for that is actually what we do with the landscape. And right now we finally, even from the political perspective, start to realize that we are the one responsible for that. We caused the troubles, and we are the one who need to tackle that. And this nature restoration law was one very crucial and probably the most significant tool that was part of the European Green Deal, directed towards biodiversity, towards ecosystem, toward restoration of what we have ruined or somehow made not good enough. And so to me it was quite a surprise, an unpleasant surprise, to see what kind of actually resistance was there in the parliament against this sort of legislation. Right now we are somewhere else finally, and I'm quite happy that we have at least something on the table.
Indeed. So I'd like to turn to you, Mr. Dorfman, because indeed it's no secret that the European People's Party, your political group, has been criticizing the nature restoration law. So, are you satisfied with the deal that was agreed last week on it, which incorporates some of the demands that the EPP has made in the last months, notably on having an emergency break, pausing the implementation of the restoration measures for a year when there is a case of a food crisis, for example? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, good afternoon. And first of all, sorry for this delay. I made the big mistake to try to come here by car. And this was quite complicated. Well, I'm satisfied. No, I'm not, because we didn't want this legislation. So, and now we will have it. To be very frank and open, I mean, we made a long battle in order to get rid of this legislation, not because we do not think that nature restoration could be an important topic, but because we think that in this last period of Timmermans, fundamentally, we had a package of very, very ideologic proposals coming from the Commission. This is fundamentally a package with the Sustainable Use Directive, with the Packaging Directive. Both we will have next week in the plenary. And we thought from the very beginning that this legislation, first of all, is not fit for purpose. And we think also that as my colleague said, the Commission says 80% of our nature, of our landscape is in bad condition. If you go to the Commission and say, okay, where are these 80%? What are the indicators? How you decide if a landscape, if I go outside from Brussels here, say, okay, this field is in bad condition or in good condition? What is the indicator? How do you have the map? Please show me where it is. They do not tell you anything because they do not have it. And I think we should not make legislation on this basis. And I personally think, also coming from a region in the middle of the Alps, I think nature protection should be, or at least in our case, is a regional competence. It's not even a national competence, it's a regional competence. It's working quite well, by the way. Why should we bring this competence at a European level? And why should we bring it at a European level in this way? Because fundamentally, what we did now, and this Michael knows very well, he said that this is an empty box. Because what happened in the parliament was absurd. No? We had a vote, and my political group was in favor of this, to reject this proposal. We lost this vote for 12 votes. And then we had a vote on the content, and on the content, fundamentally, we emptied the box completely. And now in the trialogue, some elements were put again a bit in the box, but without a real, let's say, organic law. This is not an organic law. This is a compromise which brings part of competences on nature protection and nature restoration at the European level, keeps part at the regional level, and I do not think that we will prove anything, honestly.
Mm-hmm. So just coming back on the percentages that you both talked about, the 80% of habitats being in poor condition, that's according to the assessment of the European Environment Agency based on monitoring and reporting from member states who are actually required
Natura 2000. Natura 2000.
Of Natura 2000 areas, and were required to report about the status of these protected areas. And so, Mr. Dorfmann, does that mean that the EPP is going to vote against the compromise deal in the ENVI committee on November 29th and in the plenary?
No, this I don't know. This we need to decide. We have now a law which I personally think will not bring a lot of benefit. How we will behave in the final vote, we will see. But for sure, we are not happy.
Okay. Mr. Wiesig, do you agree with this assessment that it's an empty box and that the law won't bring any positive changes to the state of biodiversity, which is degrading?
Well, as I mentioned, it was not an empty box at the beginning. Like, the proposal of the Commission was full of tools that could really improve the situation with the state of ecosystems and with the restoration of nature, both on land and on sea. We made it an empty box. The process that was decided in the committees and then in the plenary was really a very painful one. It was the first time in my career as an MEP that I have seen a file being that much resisted that not even one responsible committee was able to approve it. And it really the climax of that situation was found in the ENVI committee, where the final decision, like for how long? Like 4 hours, we were really like addressing the particular paragraphs for 4 hours and 2 sittings of the committee, and in the end there was no decision being made because it was 45 to 45 or 44 to 44, something like that. So that was very painful, and I really have to really applaud to the negotiators that they were able to propose something that was acceptable for the plenary at the end. It was really stripped of many of those crucial tools, of course, for the sake of the compromise, and the outcome was also very close. I'm not sure whether 12 voices or 24 or something like that. Not that huge majority was built around that proposal, but it was the problem of the parliament itself. And I have to stress that the situation was not problematic that much content-wise of what was in the box, but it was also a part of a political struggle where EPP was really a major player. But it was beyond the facts that where the battle was done or where the battle was fought. It was really a political statement of the EPP, where the huge part of the EPP, from the perspective of German members of that group, is actually in the opposition of their own government, and they really had to play this situational game of cards or house of cards, or whatever you might call it, where they resisted also in the places where they shouldn't have to or didn't have to, and the outcome was really not very nice, and I hope that I will not experience something like that again, because it was not for the sake of the citizens nor for the sake of the European policy. It was really a game of cards played on a political level, which, with respect to the very grim and a very critical situation our nature was not the proper one.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Dorfmann, I'd like to turn back to you, because indeed you said this legislation was not needed in the first place. So what is your group's position and proposal to address the biodiversity crisis, as nature provide a certain amount of ecosystem services that is also important for farmers, pollination for growing certain crops. For example, and DPP portrays itself as very much the farmers' party, as Manfred Weber said in September. So, what are your proposals to address biodiversity crisis affecting especially farmers, foresters, but also fishermen, if this piece of legislation is not the right one to do so?
Well, just to come back 1 second to what happened in the parliament, I agree that this was not the best moment of the parliament, I think, but at least in politics, there are political positions, and we were honest on the political position. We said from the very beginning, we do not want this law, and we voted against. We voted in favor of the rejection. But we didn't empty the box alone. There were half of the Renew group and a very nice part of S&D who voted against the rejection, but then voted to empty completely the box. And this is less honest than saying from the very beginning we are against. They saved the title, but not the content. And this we need to be very clear, because fundamentally at the end of the parliament votes, nothing remained. Agriculture, the Article 9 was completely deleted, so agriculture was completely out of the scope. And this we didn't do alone, because unfortunately we do not have the majority in the House to decide alone. We need others, and we had quite a big majority for these amendments, which, by the way, didn't come from us. These amendments, in the biggest part, came from another political group on the right of us. So things are a bit complicated. I personally think it had been wise after what happened, and I fully agree with you. I've been for 15 years in the parliament now. I never experienced a vote like we had in the Envy committee. This never, at least to me, never happened before. At least at that point, the Commission had to understand that something is not going properly, that there is a need for reflection, the whole thing. To your question, what is the right approach? I personally think a much more regional oriented approach, because I think if you need to look to nature and the need of restoration and look what is the situation, you need to have a look at what's happening at the regional level. And I give you an example from the agriculture perspective. I agree that we have situations in Europe where due to a very intensive agriculture, we lost any landscape, we lost the peatland and so on and so forth, and there is a need to intervene. But we have a lot of other regions. And I give you the example, I always take my region at home. I'm coming from a region where 70% of the region is nature, so it's forest, it's mountains, it's lakes. Other 20% is agriculture, 10% is houses and urbanized area. And from this 20% agriculture, again, and 80% is permanent grassland. So it makes sense now, and our problem is not that we lose forest because we have new permanent grassland, something like this. Our problem is that we lose permanent grassland, which becomes forest, because nobody takes care of it anymore. So that is now I need to say in a region like this, okay, take away 10% of the agricultural land because this would improve the biodiversity in the region. No, it's a completely nonsense. But in another situation might have a sense. And therefore, I think it would be much better to say, okay, have a look what's really happening on the ground and try to find a solution. The second problem I personally see, I'm working a lot in the agriculture sector. We have a common agricultural policy, and we worked a lot and successfully, I think, in regions. I think if I'm looking to Austria, also here in Belgium, we had a lot of programs, voluntary programs where we support farmers which invest in biodiversity, which invest in agrobiological programs and things like this. Once we say that these things becomes obligatory, we cannot pay them anymore, because we cannot pay for something which is obligatory. And so we will destroy part of the common agricultural policy without having a real positive result. And this, I think, we will not achieve nothing. We will achieve nothing at the end, and this is a pity.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, if I understand correctly, no legislation rather at the EU level, but more each national or regional governments tackling the issue. So in the very few minutes we have left, I'd like to talk also a little bit about like looking ahead after the EU election in June next year. Because indeed, we've seen it's been extremely difficult to find consensus on this piece of legislation and on addressing the biodiversity crisis through regulatory measures, strong pushback. And so, you know, Mr. Wiesek, what do you think that means also, you know, for the future of the Green Deal and for the capacity of the EU to, you know, address this issue of the decarbonization of the farming sector in particular and of the greening of agriculture?
That was actually why I was concerned about the chance that this legislation would not be adopted at the end. Because I perceive it from the very beginning as an integral part of the European Green Deal. You know, there is a number of legislation that is part of that package that was approved quite smoothly by the European Union. And they all were very, let's say, successful and really ambitious towards climate goals, towards technology transitions, towards circular economy aspects being implied in our environment and in our society. But the only exception where huge problems arose was related to those aspects or to those tools and to those legislations that were oriented towards the biodiversity crisis, which is also a reason why we have European Green Deal. The biodiversity crisis is embedded into the main goals. Beside the climate crisis, we also have to tackle the biodiversity crisis. You can see it in the MFF. Like since 2024, 7.5% of the MFF has to be directed toward biodiversity issues, and 10% 2026. So actually attacking this idea that it's not useful or we don't need it was, to me, actually attacking the integrity of the European Green Deal, and actually risking that the complex file of European Green Deal, where each and every legislation has a direct link towards the other legislations, would actually collapse. And it would make no sense, because we cannot tackle climate crisis without actually tackling also the biodiversity crisis and without actually improving the situation on the ground and in the field. And in that regard, I would maybe like to come back to the idea whether this should be a European goal or national goal or regional goal. It's actually needed on all those levels. We have a mandatory goal within the European scope or within the European framework, which is also mandatory on the national level, but it's very much voluntary for the individual farmer or for the individual region. And even this legislation is built around the idea that it will be implied through national strategic plans, where each and every nation can find its best way how to improve the situation and how to get to the mandatory goal. So I don't think that we are pushing some crazy European general ideas to the field. No, we are just asking where we need to go, and you find your best way how to do that on a voluntary principle in the individual level, but on the mandatory on the national level, because we all have to cooperate in this regard in order to improve the situation. Otherwise, we are doomed. We cannot work without, or we cannot go on without ecosystems, without stable climate, and without biodiversity that provides all those services that we so crucially need. Mm-hmm. This is not an option. This is really a crucial need that we have to secure, otherwise we jeopardize our future.
Mm-hmm. And also, just for context, this regulation also aims to translate into EU law some of the goals that were agreed on the international level to protect biodiversity at the COP15.
Not to mention the Kunming Montreal Convention and all that stuff. Yeah, it's interlinked.
Indeed. I'm just looking at the room to see if anybody would like to ask a question. Please raise your hand if you want to do so. Yes, please. The lady in the second row, please.
Thank you. I'm Heather Graby from the economics think tank Bruegel. So if the logic is that there needs to be a regional approach to protection of nature and restoration of nature, but we have an EU-wide common agricultural policy, how do those two things mesh? Would it make sense that the CAP gets reformed according to the principles set out in the nature restoration law through the CAP itself? I think this is a very interesting point that MEP Dorfmann made, that actually paying farmers to restore nature through their agricultural subsidies is perhaps the quickest and most efficient way to get the nature restoration. But that would imply an EU-wide approach rather than a regional one.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Mr. Dorfmann, let you answer that one first.
Yeah, but indeed we have, in my political group, we very much supported the common agriculture policy, and we supported the eco schemes in the common agriculture policy, and we supported the objective, not only objective, to reality that today 35% of the expenses of the common agriculture policy, so this is 20 billion a year, need to be spent for biodiversity and for the goals, for the aims of the Green Deal. But the common agricultural policy has been very much with this reform brought back to a national level and to a regional level. And the second pillar of the common agricultural policy has always been a regional, always a regional dimension. It is the region preparing or deciding how the money in the second pillar, so where the environmental programs are, how this needs to be spent. And I always said where I have a problem is that if you look at this, that we do not have minimum obligations for the member states. This and on nature restoration would also agree. For example, on the second pillar, we have some member states who did a lot, Austria, for example, and others who did nothing, and have big problems today, like the Netherlands, for example.
Mm-hmm. Michel, do you want to react quickly to this one? Because we're running over time.
Yeah,
so
just a fast remark. The problem is that the agriculture policy, common agriculture policy, should be part of the solution, while so far, and I have to be frank in that, it was part of the problem, and it caused many problems with the biodiversity in the field. The way it was set up pushed many species, many habitats, and many services towards this appropriate, situation where they are faced with extinction and with huge drops in population. That goes for pollinators, that goes for field birds, that goes for mammals, that goes for soil, that goes for groundwater. The direct subsidies were very successful in providing us with huge amount of high quality food. All the respect for that, but there was a price to pay for that, and it was in the extirpation rates and in the deterioration of the landscape. And we now have to turn this trend, because we cannot go on like this, because we are very close to that turning point where these ecosystems will collapse because of the lack of the biodiversity on those elements, and we would not be able to repair that only by artificial inputs. So this is the nature protection and the nature restoration is for the sake of agriculture itself. It's not against it. And that needs to be really kept in mind, and that's how the policies should look like. Mm-hmm. Being really synergic, not opposing each other.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. On that note, I need to conclude our discussion on the nature restoration law, and I'd like to thank you, both our speakers, for joining me and for your insights. We can give them a round of applause. Thank you also for the questions in the room. Now I'd like to invite my colleague Esther King to the stage for closing remarks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Really interesting discussion. No.
Thanks. All right, thank you, everybody. So the second day of Politico Sustainable Future Week is coming to a close. I want to thank you all for being here and for joining us for these interesting and at times somewhat controversial discussions. Today we heard about the obstacles standing in the way of the EU's circular economy goals, how the EU's new nature rules fit into the broader Green Deal, and how they sometimes clash with agriculture, and whether the Critical Raw Materials Act can truly put the EU on track to compete on green technology. So I want to thank, thank you. I wanted to take the time again to thank all of our speakers and moderators, and of course our partners for making this summit possible. So that would be Amazon, Coca-Cola, and Plastics Europe, our presenting partners Bayer, Google, McDonald's, and SQM, and our networking partner Duea, and our visibility partner EU City Calc. So there will be now 3 roundtable discussions starting at 5:30, followed by a networking cocktail. So our reporter Antonia Zimmerman will be moderating a roundtable on industrial pollution. That'll be in Creative Room 3, which is upstairs. And my sustainability colleague Leonie Cater will lead a roundtable on chemicals in Creative Room 4, also upstairs. And I'll be moderating a roundtable on Europe's landfilling problem, which will be down here near the main networking area. So our staff is available to lead you to these rooms. We hope to see you there, and we'll be back tomorrow for the last day of the summit, which is focused on energy policy. Thanks so much.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Yeah.